Bye. Hi, am I live? Hello? Right, apparently I am live. Can you hear me? Because I am having problems with the microphone as well. I'm not sure if it's connecting. Right, it looks as though I might be. Oh, good. You can all hear me. So let me see now if I can bring up my slides as the next challenge. Let's have a quick look at that. Right. So we've got my slides now as well. I can't see any of you, which is unusual for me, but let me start and begin the process anyway. So I was asked to talk about psychological well-being during the very, very difficult process of either downsizing your business or closing it down completely. And I can't imagine how fraught that must be for those of you who are going through it. And so I thought that it was important to leap right into the emotions of it and talk about responding to loss. I have to say one rather controversial thing is that I'm not sure if you can stay positive during this. So I noticed that my talk was described as how to stay positive when things are looking bleak. And if you look at these 6 stages described by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in the slide of the human response to loss, it makes me wonder if it's possible to even stay positive during something like this. Certainly you need to find a way to go forward. So that's certainly very clear to me. So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was a doctor working with dying people, but her work was so important that it has been adopted by the change management industry and is seen as being the a very useful description of the stages that people go through when they are in going through a loss. So it starts with shock and denial. And certainly I do think that when there is shock and denial, that is the period when perhaps you could still be managing to be extremely positive, almost as if nothing is happening. But when you've come to the ghastly realization that something is happening and that you do need to take action, you either have to close this business or you have to downscale, you probably move out of shock and denial into one of these other phases that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross describes: anger, bargaining, depression, and hopefully finally acceptance. So with all of these, it is important to acknowledge and note where you are, to be aware of how you are feeling, and to note the emotions associated with the stage, but not to act them out, particularly, for instance, in anger, which can be highly destroying at the level of relationships. So particularly in respect of anger, you want to be conscious of how angry you are, of how you want to lash out, and take yourself off for a run or find a punching bag hanging up in your garage somewhere to punch. But what is really important is not to lash out at the nearest and dearest, not to lash out at your staff, and not to kick the dog. So despite the fact that you're feeling this emotion and need to be conscious of it and accept that in yourself, it's important also not to act on it. Bargaining is an interesting one. When I look at people who are downsizing their businesses, I suspect that bargaining might happen at a different stage in the process. Bargaining is when you hope that you can possibly persuade that one client to come back on board with you that would turn it all around, or when you imagine that if you worked all night and all day, or you persuaded your staff to work longer hours, that somehow or other you could save the day. So bargaining is a stage that we go through when we are trying to prevent the worst possible scenario coming forth and hitting us. Depression, the next very, very tricky stage that happens to a lot of people. And the important thing here is to watch out for not getting stuck in that stage. I am certainly not a doctor, but everything I read tells me that if you allow yourself to get stuck in depression, it can become inordinately debilitating and disempowering and make it very hard for you to take action. So those people who feel frozen, those people who feel that they are unable to go forward, those people need to consider the possibility that they are depressed. And if you feel you've got stuck there, it might be important to talk to a GP and see if you can get a little bit of help. You entrepreneurs have amazing energy and amazing startup skills. And to feel yourself robbed of that is extremely problematic. So once again, you've got to take the heart and question whether it is best serving you and try and get your head back into gear to take the action that you need to take. Finally, you've got to care for yourself. I did not suggest that you need to start exercise. If you are not one of those people who hasn't been exercising, then it will be enough to even just breathe. So make sure you are eating properly, sleep, and breathe. And then also reach out to other people. Reaching out to other people is key. Once again, entrepreneurs are very often very independent people and take a lot of responsibility and don't easily reach out to other people for help. You have a wonderful forum on the Simply Biz website. I think it's really a valuable tool to find other people to help you. So now if there are any questions before we move on, I would like to hear from you a little bit more about the stages of loss that some of you might be experiencing and what it is that you think that you might like to do about them and what you think I think you should do about them. The next slide starts to talk about that psychological well-being, and I'm happy to go there, but I would like to hear from you. Is there anybody out there who can share with me any questions they have relating to this slide? I see somebody saying, how do we don't share anger? Well, maybe I'm going to have to talk to you about breathing. One of the most important things about anger is that it is a state of emotional hijacking. So what starts to happen is your adrenaline starts to pour through your body when you are emotionally hijacked. Your reptilian brain is activated. Your sympathetic nervous system is getting you ready for fight or flight. And when you feel that surging through you, the likelihood that you're going to say something quite destructive or do something quite destructive is quite high. So not sharing anger depends on a number of steps. The first thing is to be aware that you are feeling this. And the second thing to do is to start breathing yourself out of the situation. Believe it or not, it only takes a couple of deep oxygenating breaths to dissipate the adrenaline that is surging through your body. So if anger would not serve you in the moment, what you need to do is take a deep oxygenating breath and let it out slowly and pause. And then take another deep breath. Let it out slowly and pause. I'm just checking to see if this is a message from somebody because I'm not hearing any of you. If there are questions, please mention the name and question. All right, I will do that. A message from one of you. So I'm answering Janet's question right now about how we can not show anger. So the important thing to do when you're wanting to not show anger is to reduce that anger, to reduce the adrenaline that is absolutely surging through your body by taking a series of deep breaths. There is a wonderful practice that you should practice daily, in which I'm happy to for a copy of this practice to be put up onto the website. But even if you don't practice it, even if you just do it in the moment, walk around the corner, take yourself off outside, take yourself into another room and breathe deeply, and imagining that emotional barometer just dropping. And as that anger dissipates, once again, this very good entrepreneurial mind is then in a position to take charge again. So thanks for that, Janet, and I hope that that very brief explanation was a good one. Monique is asking, how do I express that I'm feeling vulnerable to staff and clients without losing credibility as a business owner? One of the things that I am hoping we will have time for is to move towards that question of managing human relations, because part of psychological well-being, Monique, is definitely maintaining positive relationships with others. So part of psychological well-being is maintaining self-mastery, learning, for example, how to master your emotions. And the other thing is maintaining good relationships with others. I think I would certainly love to skip to the slide at the end to show you this, but in your discussions with people, it's important to say that this is a hard time and that I am having a hard time and that I know that this is a hard time for many of the rest of you as well. It's important to be open and to be honest. And certainly, Monique, I'd like to kind of address that a little bit more and go just go through a couple more slides and then move back to that question of being vulnerable on one hand while maintaining your credibility on the other. I think that people expect and people understand that people are going through a hard time. And I think sometimes we're laying a trip on ourselves more than actually having fearing our reaction from other people. I think that if you can maintain your emotional calm and respond directly to people, that is certainly the best way to go. Janet is asking another question, is being positive false if I'm downsizing, or is it a case of trying to see the positives in anything? I think there are always some positives insofar as that there are huge learnings. And if you are coming to an ending, Janet, you've got to try to come to the best possible ending that you can come to. And the fact that a number of you have logged onto this website to learn about handling this process is an incredibly positive sign to me. But I think being jovial and expressing huge amounts of enthusiasm could indeed be experienced as false by other people, particularly if you are out of kilter with their fear and anxiety. So if you can imagine that your staff and perhaps many of your clients are also going through a hard time and experiencing fear and anxiety, overly enthusiastic expressions of positivity could indeed be experienced as false by other people. So my suggestion is I'd like to move on to the next slide, because when I do that, then I can show you why trying to be positive or look to the future is nonetheless important. So we've talked about this question of loss and acknowledging the fact that you're going through a traumatic process of loss. And now I want to just talk briefly about what does constitute psychological well-being. And one of the factors associated, according to Carol Riff, of psychological well-being is personal growth. So it is very important to turn what you are going through into an experience in which you learn as much as you possibly can about how to manage yourself and how to manage other people and how to bring about the best possible ending that you can bring about. Now, I don't think that's exactly the same as being positive, but it is certainly about looking for the positive in an extremely traumatic situation. And the important thing about personal growth is that it becomes critical in an environment where points 2 and 3 have virtually been wrested from your hands. So we all like to be autonomous and independent, and I think entrepreneurs are particularly autonomous and independent people. They're empowered people. They make up their own minds about things. They take decisions. They are independent thinkers, and they like to have control over their environment. But certainly what has happened to us in this country in the last couple of months is that between the coronavirus and between regulations that have been made, a lot of us have felt that our autonomy and our environmental mastery has been taken completely out of our hands. In fact, those of you who are downsizing or actually bringing your businesses to an end are feeling that more than anybody else. And so this is where personal growth becomes important. And I have come up with a number of questions that you can ask yourself, that you can take yourself through during your personal reflection time in order to try and grab back a sense of, I am not a victim in this situation. I am just a little bit in charge of how this plays out. And to my mind, that is the most positive you can be. You can say, this is a lousy deck of hands that I have to play, but I can play it as best I can. I can try to do the right things. I can follow the right steps, and I can slowly, bit by bit, follow the process that will take me into the final stages of this business coming to an end and look to the future. So it's not about that wonderful, heady kind of positivity that you feel when you're starting something up with enthusiasm. It's more about a very kind of solid approach to personal growth and to taking yourself step by step out of this process. I'm struggling a little bit now because we started a little bit late, I think, to know whether I should just go ahead with all my slides. But once again, let me show you the next slide relating to personal growth. So when I talk about personal growth, these are the kinds of questions I think I'm talking about. If change is inevitable, then growth is intentional. It doesn't just happen. And you don't just learn from experience either. You learn from reflecting upon your experience. So when life has dealt you a really lousy set of cards and you don't have control over your environment, what can you take back? And these are the kinds of learnings that you need to engage in order to recreate in yourself a sense of, I am not a victim here, I am still empowered. Thinking to the future, is there anything I would do differently? Thinking about the past, is there anything that I did really well that I would do in future? What did I handle well? What are my greatest skills and strengths? And where do I need other support and help? What kind of people added the most value to me? What kind of people did I find it hard to get along with? Did I get enough help from friends and from staff? And what can I learn about bringing this business to an end or ending this relationship with these key staff members? What can I learn about doing that in the best possible way possible? So that is the kind of way in which you can process your emotions and switch on a little bit of positivity and regain a little bit of a sense of control in a situation which feels fundamentally quite out of control. I see from Monique that she says that she's finding this really interesting, and that is very encouraging, Monique, because I must say that this rather late start threw me out a little bit. So the personal growth questions are questions that you can take away, and I'm not going to belabor them now. You can look at them into the future. What I want to talk about before I bring this to an end and take more questions is positive relations with others. And that goes back to, I think it was Monique's question. Oh no, it was Michaela's question. How do I keep positive with my staff and clients? How do I express that I'm feeling vulnerable? The important thing point 4 or point 5 is to communicate, communicate, communicate. However, see point 1. You need to seek first to understand, then to be understood. You need to engage in lots of communication with your staff and also with your clients. But it is important to share minimally and to ask lots and lots of questions. I fear, alas, that this is not a learning I have taken for this presentation, and I really ought to have made it more of a chat and less of a presentation, I realize. So we all live and learn. Ask questions. Find out what your clients are coping with. Tell them what you're coping with. Manage your emotion. Your credibility lies in how you handle yourself. Your credibility is not destroyed by the fact that you are having a hard time. You are certainly not alone in having a hard time. So find out what staff are going through. Remember that they are on exactly the same roller coaster that you're on. They're also going through those terrible stages of loss. They've been in denial. It won't happen. I can't possibly be retrenched. This won't happen to me. Our business won't come to an end. And then they may lash out. They may lash out in anger. They may lash out at you. They will also go into depression. So bear in mind that your staff are going through all of those same emotional roller coaster rides, and ask lots of questions. Ask how they're feeling. Say you're sorry. Tell them that you're finding it really hard too, and listen. It is not easy to listen to people and maintain your own emotional equanimity, but it is really important to try to do that, to try to be that broad pair of shoulders. This does not mean that you can make it all go away. This does not mean that you can fix it for everybody, but you can hear them out. So it's really important during this process to communicate with people, to clarify expectations, to communicate regularly, but to ask questions and not feel that you need to be the one talking all the time. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about thanking people for their contribution. In our society, we talk often about closure, and I think that closure is a much overrated thing, because the reality is that closure comes with time. Closure does not come because we have a memorial service or a funeral. Closure, when there's loss, closure when a business ends, comes over a long period of time and a long period of reflection, thinking through those personal growth questions that I showed you on the previous slide. But I think what you can do is thank people for their contribution. And because we can't get people together to share a pizza and give each other a hug, and because that is so hard under coronavirus conditions, what I suggest you can do is write a note to each staff member who is leaving and thank them heartily for every contribution they've made. And mention their strengths. Mention what you've really valued for them. Because what you're trying to do is say a good and thorough goodbye and bring people some sort of closure. You can even suggest that staff who are staying behind, if you are downsizing, might like also to write to people. And you might like to also look if there's anything else that staff would like to do. Would those who are surviving the downsizing like to make a contribution towards a spa voucher, a Checkers voucher? Would staff who are remaining like to also engage in a gesture in which they show respect towards their colleagues? So maintaining positive relationships with others over this period is also very important for your psychological well-being. The only point I haven't mentioned is point 3, which is do the right thing. What is wonderful about this Simply Biz bootcamp is it takes you step by step through the process of things that you need to do. And this is not a time to cut corners. This is a time to be guided by your conscience and to do the right thing by people. You need to be able to know that when it comes to the end, you did your best by the people that you worked with. I see Janet is asking a question, and I'm ready to take any other questions now as well. How else can we support our staff who will stay with us? I think it's important to remember something called survivor syndrome. Believe it or not, your staff who stay will feel guilty. They'll feel guilty about the fact that they were the ones who stayed behind, which is why it's important to try to create opportunities for them to say goodbye to their colleagues, to express how much they valued their colleagues, and possibly to reach out to their colleagues if that is appropriate, in the form of something small, by contributing to a gift or a Checkers voucher or something or other like that. But what you need to also do is continue the communicate with your existing staff. What makes people really, really fearful is not knowing what's going on. So if you haven't been very good at doing it before, this is your time to clarify expectations, to make it very, very clear to staff members what is going to save this business and what this business needs to do and what they need to do in order for this business to reach its targets. Clarify expectations and communicate. As hard as you are working as an owner, don't be an absentee landlord. Don't disappear off the scene. Communicate with your staff. I see that Monique is asking me a question. What if a staff member wasn't really great as an employee? How can you be authentic when releasing them? I'm sorry, but that does make me laugh. You are absolutely right. That can happen. Of course, when you go through the process, you do know that you can't performance manage people out at this point. At this point, you have to follow either the last in, first out, or the criteria of the job. You have to follow a good legal procedure in selecting the people who you want to get who have to leave. You can't merely select the people who you don't get on with as well, or who don't perform or deliver as well. You know, I think you can be honest. If you've had a bad relationship with somebody, I think you can say, I'm sorry, we didn't always see eye to eye. We didn't always get on well. And in recent months, things have been really hard. But I am nonetheless terribly sorry that we haven't had time to improve our relationship, work better together. And I'm really sorry when I think about how hard this is going to be for you. And I really do wish you well from the bottom of my heart, notwithstanding differences you and I might have had in the past. I really think that being authentic, as Monica said, is incredibly important. I also would start by really trying to think, well, for goodness me, what is it about this person? You know, maybe they have a skill that you weren't really able to use. I see you as somebody who is enormously creative, and I'm so sorry that we weren't always able to use your creativity. Perhaps we had you in a role where your creativity was not what was required, and I do so very much hope that your creativity will be useful for you in the future. So I think it's important to, if you can, use this as a time to build people's sense of their value. This would be a wonderful thing to do, but you have to be authentic. Monique, you're absolutely right. Authenticity is key. So are there any other questions that I can take at this time? Monique, Janet, Michaela, anybody else who's been asking questions? Is there anything else I can add? Or are we pretty well at the end now? I'm not hearing anybody at all, so you do need to respond to me to let me know. Janet saying, I love the emphasis on relationships. Thank you so much. Yeah, Jan, thanks very much for that as well. It goes back to that psychological well-being. For psychological well-being, you need not only to manage your relationship with yourself, but your relationship with other people as well. That is going to take you through to the end of this process with as much residual positivity as possible. Any other questions from anybody? It's not looking like it. So it looks as though I should be signing off, but I'll await an instruction to do that. I think that's it. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Bye.